Hello everyone, I am Jonce, and this is Dominion Overexplained. So, I've been playing Dominion for a very long time, competitively even, almost since Dominion base set was first released back 100 years ago or something. So, I have a lot of experience with this game. I don't think I would consider myself, in like that very top tier of players, but I would consider myself to be a very strong player. And so there are a lot of other videos you can watch on sort of the foundational concepts of Dominion and how other people play. But I wanted to sort of take a slightly different approach to this. And what I wanted to do was review a game I recently played against Tracer for the A Division for Dominion League, and sort of go over it in an extremely fine level of detail, kind of highlighting my thought process, what I'm thinking about, how I'm making decisions and things like this. Now, I do live commentary for these matches, and I'll link that down in the whatever that place is. But my live commentary is not meant to be educational in any way. Mostly because I'm trying to focus my attention on actually, playing the best game I can and winning the game. And so it's hard for me to take the time to kind of break it down, while I'm doing that. So, as such, my live commentary is not very beginner friendly. But this video here is meant to be as beginner friendly as possible, right? I'm going to try to just overview this game in as fine a level of detail as possible. So, yeah, that's enough. That's enough introduction. So why don't we go ahead and take a look at really what's going on here? Now, one of the things that makes Dominion really, really great is that every game is at least a little bit different, and sometimes it's a lot different. This kingdom here there's 10 kingdom cards. There's 2 events over here, and competitive Dominion is generally played with a fully or mostly random kingdom. So this kingdom right here, this set of cards that was chosen, I have never seen this set of cards before. I don't expect to ever see this set of cards again. Right, with how many cards are in Dominion, it's a statistical impossibility that you see the same kingdom twice, right? And so the question is, how do you analyze a game that you've never played before, right? I've never played this kingdom before. I haven't practiced it. I haven't developed strategies specifically for this kingdom. I have to take a look at this board and use the understanding that I have to figure out the best way to play this kingdom and the best way to optimize my chances to win this particular kingdom. So, I guess I'll bring up the actual kingdom screen here. So on the actual kingdom screen here, we can see all the various kingdom cards. I'm not going to sit here and read them, but if you need to pause the video and take a look at what they do, please do so. And here's the 2 events that are in play, and some other various components to the kingdom, the ruins pile, some non-kingdom cards, hexes, boons, things like this. We'll get into that later. For right now, let's just keep our attention focused on these top 10 cards here. So, when you're thinking about what you want a kingdom to do, and we'll probably start with just like a little broad terminology that I personally use. I think other people might conceptualize the game a little bit differently than I do, and that's completely fine. They are free to make their own video. This one's mine. So, when I think about these various cards, I will roughly divide the various roles a card performs into one of 3 broad categories. All right, there's scoring or points. So a card like Province, for instance, up here. All right, Province, it costs 8 coins. It produces 6 points. That's all it does, right? It gives you some points to work with. Now, Dominion, you win the game Dominion by ending the game with the most points in your deck. And so, these are the things you actually want to get. But Province comes with a downside, and that downside is it doesn't do anything else, right? It doesn't draw you cards, it doesn't make you money, all it does is give you points, and points don't do anything until the game is over, right? So a lot of times with Dominion, we don't start by just getting all the green cards we can. We don't just try to maximize our score in the short term. We try to maximize our score in the long term. And generally this means building other things in your deck before you start taking your green cards, right? And on this board, we can take a look at what the kingdom cards are. There's nothing else here in the kingdom that makes points for us. So this board is limited by provinces, duchies, estates. And then there's some negative points. Curses have negative points, and one of the hexes creates the miserable or twice miserable, which is also some negative points, right? But for the most part, we're limited to only these couple different ways to score. Provinces, in kingdoms without alternative points, alternative, score mechanisms, province is usually the thing you want to eyeball, right? That's the thing you're targeting, and you want to try to get as many provinces as you can. Now, sometimes you can get fewer provinces if you get a lot of duchies, but usually provinces and duchies are provinces mainly and duchies kind of secondarily. Estates generally don't score enough to actually be worthwhile. Only 1 point is just, it's not very much. So that's your first category of cards. Your second category of cards is what I would call payload. So payload is anything that allows you to increase your ability to add cards to your deck. So gold is a payload card, I would call it. Right? Gold, what it does is when you play this in your buy phase, you produce 3 coins. Right? This is a payload card. Now that's great, because things cost money, right? You want to buy your scoring cards, province costs 8. Well, gold gets you 3/8 of the way there. Great. Other payload cards are things like silver, right? Copper would be a payload card. In the kingdom here, you can consider Vault a payload card because it gives you coins when you discard cards. Marauder creates spoils, right? And spoils would be a payload card. In some sense, you can consider Marauder a payload card because it gains you a payload card, which is spoilers. Spoils. Idle, right, gives you 2 coins. There's lots of things that make economy for you, right? So that's your second category of cards. The other thing that I would put under payload would be things like plus buy, right? Plus buy or plus gains. Because if you, let's say you have a deck that produces 100 money, if you only have 1 buy, well, that's not any different than producing 8 money, right? Like, there's no difference between 8 and 100 if you only have 1 buy, because the most expensive thing in this kingdom costs 8, which is a province. So, plus buy is another way to add payload, right? It increases your ability to gain cards during your turn. The third category of cards is what I would call control. Control is the ability to draw and play your cards, right? Now, gold's a payload card. It produces 3 coins, but it only produces 3 coins when you can play it. So if you don't draw this gold, it doesn't produce any coins, right? It's only producing 3 when you're able to play it. So control cards are things like anything that gives you plus cards, right? Faithful Hound draws you 2 cards, right? So you play Faithful Hound, you see more cards in your deck. That's a control card, right? That's adding ability to see more of your deck and play more of your deck every single turn. Things like Storyteller, right? That's also, I would call it a control card because it turns your payload basically into control. It basically takes like the treasures that you have, the money you get from your treasures, and it uses, instead of giving you money and payload, it turns that into control or draw, right? So drawing cards would be control. Sifting cards, right? Storeroom, you can discard cards to draw more cards. That's kind of a control element there because you can discard your bad cards and draw better cards. So that would also be an element of control. One other really important element of control would be trashing. So you start the game with, and you can see over here on the log, you start the game with 7 coppers and 3 estates. Some games have slightly different setup rules, but in this game here, 7 coppers, 3 estates, right? So copper is a payload card. It produces a coin, but it's really bad at doing that, right? An entire card for a single coin is not very good. And so every time you draw a copper, that means you're not drawing a better card, right? Like, let's say you had a deck of like a bunch of copper and a bunch of silver. Every copper you draw means you're not drawing a silver. But if you were to be able to get rid of all that copper, then your density of silver increases, and you'll end up drawing more silver every turn. Estates also are in your starting deck, but they're also really bad. Because again, this doesn't do anything. This doesn't give you any ability to buy new cards or anything like that whatsoever. So all it does is get in the way. Sorry, sometimes there's a little traffic outside. I'm not sure you can hear that or not, but we'll just ignore that and move on. So it's really helpful to get rid of these cards, right? Copper estates are mostly just in the way of you drawing your better cards and playing your better cards. And so trashing is a way to get rid of these cards. Now, a lot of newer players will think that trashing is only for things like junk, like, like killing the curse pile or killing the ruins that you get from Marauder or something like that. But no, trashing is usually best on coppers and estates because these are things that you just do not want in your deck. So by having fewer junky cards in your deck, right, you're going to see your better cards more often. So think of it this way. If you had a deck with a lot of junk and like 5 golds in it, you might see those golds, like every gold you might see like once every turn, every few turns, right? Every like 3 or 4 turns. But if you have a really clean deck without a lot of junk in it, you're going to see those golds almost every single turn, right? And so you're able to play your payload cards more often the fewer junk cards you have. So these are the basic 3 elements that I would say make up a Dominion board. We could make a 4th category that I would call attacks, but attacks generally hurt one of the other 3 categories. Right, so Marauder, for instance, hands out ruins, and ruins are a junk card. They have like some effect, but the effects they give are like very, very bad, right? Like these aren't things you really want usually. And so they're kind of junky cards. So Marauder is an attack, but it hurts your opponent's control, right? It adds junk to your opponent's deck, which makes them less likely to see their good cards because they're drawing these junky ruins instead. There are other attacks which can hurt, your opponent's economy or their payload, or their points directly, right? So attacks generally impact your opponent's either scoring, payload, or control. All right. So this is how I very broadly sort of conceptualize what cards do in Dominion. So now the question is, how do we balance these things? Because the idea is, again, you want to end the game with more points than your opponent. But you don't want to just start adding points early, because the more points you add, the less control you have, and the less often you see your payload cards, and the harder it is to buy more scoring points, right? So generally speaking, this is the rule of thumb that you should think about. First, control. Second, payload. Third, scoring. All right? Usually, you get your deck under control, if possible, before you start adding your payload cards. And then once you have sufficient payload, that's when you can start adding your green cards, your scoring cards. All right? So that would largely be like the 3 phases of the game as most boards develop. Obviously, there's always exceptions for every single rule, but this board here is fairly typical in this regard. And as far as control goes, trashing is king. All right, trashing is the thing you often want to consider at the very beginning of the game most readily is, can I trash cards from my deck, and how quickly can I trash cards from my deck? So when we're analyzing this kingdom here, there is one and only one card that trashes, and that is Amulet. Amulet lets you do a couple different things, but the biggest thing that Amulet does is let you trash a card from your hand. It is also duration, so you have to trash a card this turn and trash a card next turn. So Amulet lets you trash 2 cards, which is a pretty good deal. Now the reason that we prioritize trashing in the early game is because, again, coppers and estates are junk. They get in the way of you drawing your better cards. So if you open with a trashing card, you trash some cards, well, next time through your shuffle, you're going to see those cards sooner, right? You're more likely, so like if you take an amulet, you trash some cards, next time through your shuffle, you're more likely to find your amulet because coppers and estates are no longer in the way, right? And so you can use that amulet to trash more cards and then see your amulet even faster, right? Dominion is a game that tends to snowball a lot. And so early on, we trash our junk cards and we get our deck nice and clean. We get control of our deck. And then we can start adding payload cards. And the reason is, if you add a payload, so let's say you have complete control of your deck. You are drawing every single card in your deck. You're playing every single card in your deck every single turn very reliably, right? This is a deck that I would say has full control. Well, if I add a gold to that deck, I'm going to play that gold every single turn. If I add a gold to a deck that is not under control, I'm not going to play that gold every single turn. So the deck that has control, that gold will pay for itself a lot faster than a deck that does not have control. So typically we prioritize control in the early game, and of the control cards we prioritize trashing. Now, not every game has trashing. There's lots of nuances to this, but if there is a board that has some trashing, typically you want to get it as early as possible. The slight corollary to that is because getting trashing in early is so good, anything which junks your opponent early is also usually pretty good, because it reduces their ability to gain control. So Marauder is a card that is sometimes an often okay thing to open with, especially if there's no trashing or if there's weak trashing on the board. It can be a pain for your opponent to deal with the ruins. And so it's often a consideration to open with something like Marauder. Something like Witch or Young Witch or any of the Witch family that gives out curses tends to be pretty strong to get early in the game because, again, you're reducing your opponent's ability to gain control of their deck. However, on this board, Marauder hands out 1 junk card, Amulet trashes 2 junk cards, right? So in the balance of thing, Amulet probably helps you clean up your deck faster than Marauder could actually junk it, and so on a board like this, I would probably prioritize Amulet over Marauder on the open. The other thing to consider is what else these cards do for you. Marauder, the turn you play it, doesn't do anything at all for you, right? It junks your opponent, which is fine, but it doesn't do anything for you this turn. So next shuffle, you'll see a Spoils, which is, it's a fine card. It's not amazing, but it's fine. But the problem with Spoils is Spoils also gets in the way of you being able to play your cards as well, because now you're drawing Spoils instead of drawing, your other cards. So Spoils is okay. It's not bad, but it does kind of get in the way a little bit. So Marauder is a junking attack, but it kind of junks you as well, so it's not as strong as some of the other junking attacks. But it's still, fine. But then again, Amulet is going to be a really good card here, because not only does it trash, once it's done trashing, it does other stuff as well. So I want to get Amulets early, I want to trash down, I want to thin my deck, get it very clean, and then the question is, how do I proceed from there? And so when you're looking at the rest of this board, you're asking yourself, okay, what other control cards are there? Because you want to be able to play and gain a bunch of other things. Now, drawing on this board, there's a few different options. There's Faithful Hound draws you cards, Archive draws you cards, right? This turn it gets you just 1 of 3 cards, but in the next subsequent 2 turns it will give you an extra card. So Archive draws cards for you, Vault has +2 cards, that one draws, and Storyteller. Now, of these options, you're usually going to want to play with something. Storyteller is the only, well, I guess Archive also has +, action on it, but Storyteller has +1 action on it, which is, in the terminology we use, we call this a non-terminal. So things with actions, we call non-terminal. Things without + action, called terminal. By default, you only get 1 action, so you can only play 1 terminal. So there are cards like Border Village that say things like +2 actions. We call this a village effect. This allows you to play more than 1 terminal a turn, but if Border Village wasn't here, then you'd be stuck with a single terminal, right? You got to think about what terminal to pick. But we have a Border Village, so we can play lots of terminals. But I will say, Storyteller is generally really good at actually drawing cards. And so when I look at this board, I think, okay, Storyteller is really good at drawing cards, and there's not a lot of actions that produce economy. So most of the economy you want on this board, economy you can get a little bit from Vault or a little bit from Storeroom, a little bit from Tormentor, right? Produces 2 coins, but most of the economy on this board is treasures, right? Gold, silver, copper, idol. That's where the bulk of your economy is going to be coming from. And so because my economy is very treasure heavy, Storyteller is actually really, really good with treasure heavy decks, because it lets you play those treasures and then, draw more treasures. You play Storyteller on A copper, it just replaces itself. You play Storyteller on a silver, well, that silver turns into 2 cards, which is great. You play Storyteller on a gold, that turns into 3 cards. That's great. So Storyteller is very good to draw in treasure-heavy decks. And also point out that the other thing this board does that's really nice is Amulet does produce silver for you. So silver, gaining a bunch of silver and having a bunch of Storytellers is going to let you draw a whole lot of your deck every single turn, which means you get to play your payload cards much more often, fairly rapidly. So I'm pretty keen on taking like Amulet opens, playing with some Storytellers, and probably taking some idols, again, like cursing attack, like idol does curse, and handing out curse is a pretty good effect, so idol's probably a pretty decent card here as well. And so when I look at this board, those are the main bits of the engine to me, is Amulet, trashing, later gaining silvers, into like a Storyteller idol drawing scenario. And that's sort of my general idea for this board. Now, I'm going to be honest, I don't actually usually look that far ahead when I'm playing Dominion. I kind of take a look at what's looking okay in the short term. Maybe I have some like rough idea of kind of what this board does, but I'm not thinking like, okay, I want exactly this many idols and this many Storytellers, and I want to have, you know, this many storerooms. I want to start taking provinces on this turn. Like I don't. There's no way you can think about it at that level. You sort of just have to get a rough sense of what you want to do on the board, and then kind of see how it develops. Or at least that's how I generally play. So, there's more cards on this board that can be of relevance to us, but again, those are the ones that are primarily here. The very last thing that I think is important to talk about when you're analyzing a kingdom is the buy situation. So if Storm did not exist on this board, there's no reliable source of plus buy. Now, Idol does give you a boon on the first play, and there is one boon. Where are you? There is one boon, the Forest Gift, which gives you a plus buy, but that only means that every 1 in 12 plays of Idol, you know, do you get to have a plus buy. So Storm is like the main source of plus buy on this board. Now, if Storm did not exist and there was no plus buy, that means you're limited to a single buy, which means the best your turn can really do is buy a province. At least in the end game, right? Like that's the most points you can score. It's just buying a province. That's it. And those boards play a little bit differently than boards that do have plus buy. Because boards with plus buy, you are often able to buy more than one province in a turn, right? You can try to buy 2 provinces in a turn. You can try to buy 3 provinces in a turn. And so the presence of Storm here does change the complexion of how much you build, because when you have plus buys, you can build a little bit longer and then do like double province turns or triple province turns. Or in some extreme cases, you can, you know, build and build and build and build and build forever until you just take 8 provinces, right? So the fact that Storm exists on this board does change the complexion a little bit. So that's one of the things I'm looking for also in a kingdom is, are there plus buy here? And there is Storm for that. So we have our trashing, we have our draw, we have our payload, we have some plus buy, we have some attacks. There's no extra VP, which means we're just focusing on the province over here. All right. So now that that's all out of the way, let's go ahead and actually follow along with the game. Right? I think I you know, discussed this in enough detail, at least before the first things are bought for the game. So we're gonna go through. I'm just gonna bring up this. Where are you? There you are. All right. So this is the actual game. This is the video I recorded, and I'm just going to take the time to sort of play through it and comment along. And kind of describe my decisions. So, again, like I said, I was playing Tracer for this. This was an A division match. Coming into this game, Tracer had just beaten me, let's see, 3 times in a row. So I was really hoping to get some decent draws and have some decent luck and you know, hopefully find a win here, because I was definitely not doing so hot coming in here. So, like I said, I'm going to open Amulet. The question is, or let me just define. When I say open, what I'm talking about is the first 2 things, usually. Because you start with 7 coppers and 3 estates, and so you have 7 coins total. So either you get a 2 and a 5, which happens 1/6 of the time, or you get a 3 and a 4, which happens 5/6 of the time, right? So sometimes you get the 5-2, the 5 copper hand and the 2 copper hand. but usually you get the 3 copper hand and the 4 copper hand. So both me and I believe Tracer do have the 4 copper hand, 3 copper hand, the 4-3 split. And so knowing you get the 4-3 split, right, you can know you shouldn't be thinking about just what to buy this turn, but you should be thinking about your first 2 buys. We would call those the opening buys. So like I said, I want Amulet for sure because it trashes. And the question is, what else do I want? Opening Silver is okay. The main reason you open Silver on a board is to hit a 5 cost. Now these 5 costs are okay, but they're not like a huge priority. You know, Storyteller is okay, but it's not incredible in the early game because usually Storyteller in the early game is just playing coppers, and so it's mostly just like deck cycling a little bit. So Silver on this board is probably not super exciting to me. What I would like, though, is to trash as much as possible, because getting rid of those coppers in the States is really important. So it's very often the case that you want to open with double Amulet. Amulet, Amulet. It's a pretty solid open most of the time. Now, I would probably open Amulet, Amulet here regardless, but there is the existence of one other thing here that makes it even a little bit more appealing, and that is Toil. So I guess I can just bring this back up here while here. Toil is an event. It gets you plus buy. So events are things that you buy for a single effect. They're not cards that you buy that go into your deck forever. They're just a one-time effect that you can purchase. So Toil lets you play an action card from your hand in your buy phase. So normally you have one action, right? You play an action, and Amulet is a terminal action, does not give you plus action. So you play an Amulet, and that's the only one you can play. So if you happen to draw both of your Amulets at the same time, you can only play one of them, right? So we call that terminal collision or collision. It's one of the reasons we often don't open with 2 terminals, is because, right, if they collide, you're pretty sad about it. So a lot of times you only open with 1 terminal to avoid that collision. But Toil gets around that a little bit, because what Toil lets you do is, in your buy phase, just pay 2 coins to play your other terminal if they happen to collide. So Toil helps mitigate the risk of terminal collision a little bit. Now, if Toil wasn't here, I would still open double Amulet. It's just Toil makes it, you know, even a little bit stronger. So, oh wait, I didn't switch over the screens. Sorry, I was talking about Toil, but, you know, you can take a look what that does. So, actually, Tracer had to take a short break here, and he was gone for a couple minutes. So I'm just going to jump forward a few minutes in the video. There we go. So Tracer plays his copper, and Tracer also opens with an Amulet. I take a second Amulet. Tracer takes a second Amulet. Great. So like I said, I do get the terminal collision here on turn 3, but Toil is here to kind of save me from having to worry about the fact that they both collided. Now, Amulet is a duration. You play it this turn, and you also get an effect next turn, which means that Amulet is a lot better to find on turn 3 than on turn 4. Because if you turn on turn 3, you get to play it again, or you get to get the effect again on turn 4, and then you shuffle your deck, and the Amulet is back in your deck for you. So generally things like duration cards, reserve cards, are a lot stronger turn 3 than turn 4. So me finding both my Amulets on turn 3 here is very lucky and very strong. All right. So I had a very, very good start here. I guess I will say that, you know, Dominion is a game of luck. It's a game of risk management. It's a game of sort of mitigating downsides and capitalizing on upsides and things like this. So, you know, sometimes you draw badly and you lose. Sometimes you draw really well and you win. And that's going to happen, right? That's why we don't play just a single game of Dominion. We play many games of Dominion. The Dominion League plays 6 games. You know, even over 6 games, like, the luck still plays an enormous role in who can win or lose. But, you know, you play enough games of Dominion and the luck effects sort of even out a bit. But my start here is very, very lucky. So, sorry, let me just jump right back real quick. So, I didn't actually discuss what I actually did on that turn, did I? So, like I said, trashing is the highest priority. And I'm playing this video at like double or triple speed or something just so it plays a little faster, but I'll pause frequently. So here I'm trashing this estate because estates are terrible. They get in the way of all your stuff that you want to play. So the reason you open Amulet is to trash, and you should have a good reason to not trash something. So I'm definitely trashing this estate, 100%. Now, I do need to spend both these coppers to toil this other amulet, so I can't trash again. Taking +1 card here doesn't actually help, and I do decide that a silver is better than nothing. It's not always the case that silver is better than nothing, but I think on a board with Storyteller, wanting to play silvers anyway, like taking a free silver is fine. So I take the silver off of this second amulet. And I think for a second whether or not I want it, but I do. And Tracer goes ahead and does a similar thing. Tracer goes ahead and takes the amulet, trashes an estate on turn 3. So again, the turn 3 amulet's very good to see, but only 1 amulet for Tracer. And trashes the estate and gains a Faithful Hound. Faithful Hound is okay on this board. It doesn't... It's +2 cards, but it's terminal, and you already have 2 amulets already. Toil helps a little bit with the terminal collisions. I think the Faithful Hound is fine. It also interacts with like Storeroom Vault later on, possibly. Also, once you get some border villages, you can play it, to draw cards is also fine. So Faithful Hound is okay in these decks. Taking one early, though, could sometimes lead to trouble, but I think Toil is enough of a reason to just take the Hound early on. I think if Toil didn't exist, I can't speak for Tracer, but I think the Faithful Hound there was fine. But if Toil wasn't there, I might just skip and buy nothing. Sometimes buying nothing is the correct play. A lot of times players think that, okay, I have 2 coins, I need to buy something that costs 2 coins. And nope, you can just buy nothing. Buying nothing is sometimes correct, and it's fine. So I have this turn right here. My 2 amulets are durationed. My first one trashes estate. Great. Now I have an option. There's really, I can also gain silver, but gaining silver is not a good idea here. There's really 2 real options. One is I can trash a copper, which is great. Again, trashing copper is great. If I trash a copper, I only have 3 coins to spend this turn, which probably just means I buy a silver, which is fine. Trash a copper, buy silver is fine. You're basically turning a copper into a silver, so it increases your money density. Silver plays better with Storyteller, etc., etc. The other option is I take a coin here and I don't trash, and instead I take a Storyteller. So the question is, and these are the 2 options basically, is I can take 2 silvers, which I don't like that idea. I can turn a copper into a silver. I could just trash a copper and not gain anything, which doesn't sound super great to me. Or getting like a storeroom. I do want storerooms eventually, but it's pretty early for them. Or I take a Storyteller. And Storyteller is probably pretty good at this point, because you play a Storyteller, you play it on some copper, you draw through your deck. Playing the Storyteller is really helpful for finding your amulets and trashing, more often. So I think in the long run, taking a coin and buying a Storyteller will let me see my amulets more often, and it will let me trash those coppers more frequently. So while I get 1 less card of trashing now, I do gain some more tempo for my deck to cycle through faster and to increase my trashing later in the turn, or later in the game. So I think overall, taking the Storyteller here makes the most sense to me, and that's what I go ahead and do. Tracer on his turn 4 misses the second amulet, so Tracer does not play another amulet here, which is a shame, because it means that my opening turns were just much, 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 much better than Tracer's opening turns. And I meant to talk about first player advantage a little earlier, but I'm also first player on this board. Different kingdoms have different levels of advantage for the first player, but pretty much every board has some advantage for first player, right? Being first in the game is just preferable. And so I am happy to go first. I got a luckier turn 3 and a luckier turn 4. So just based on nothing related to our play, just based purely on, luck, I'm in a pretty good position in this game. And again, that happens. So here, I'm able to play the Storyteller, play 2 coppers, which lets me cycle through some more of my deck. I find the 1 amulet. It is also pretty lucky to find the Storyteller right there, because it means I can, immediately cycle through my deck a little faster. So I get to play this amulet here. I don't draw my second amulet, which is fine. Again, I have an option here, right? I can either take a coin and a Storyteller, or I can trash this estate. This is a little bit of a harder decision. Trashing estate is a lot nicer than trashing copper, especially with Storytellers flying around, because Storyteller can't play estate, but Storyteller can play copper. So I think this this time I do opt to trash. Do I? I think I opt to trash here. I think about it for a while because I'm going back and forth on whether or not it's better to trash or to gain. Yeah, and I do trash. If someone told me that it was better to take a coin to buy a storyteller again, I think that's that would be completely reasonable. But I just wanted to trash my last estate there. And given that I have this much economy, again, I can't buy anything like really great here. So my options are buy nothing, which is, usually an option, and it's not always a bad option. I can buy Marauder. The problem with Marauder is I have a lot of terminals in my deck, and Marauder isn't... It's fine, but again, it's a little bit slow. It kind of works okay with the Storyteller. It's definitely a consideration. I don't think I want a third amulet. 2 is usually enough to... 2 is like usually the right number of amulets to have in your deck. I can buy another silver, which is fine, or I can buy a Storeroom. Now, Storeroom doesn't do anything in the short term. It's not a particularly strong card right now because I can't really make use of the econ, and I can't really make use of the buy until I have more economy. But I go ahead and I buy a Storeroom anyway because I'm going to want one eventually. And if I buy one now, it only costs me 4 coins because I had 4 coins. If I buy one later, it probably costs me more than that because I'm probably spending a lot more on the Storeroom later. So by buying it now, it saves me the opportunity of having to buy it later at the cost of just kind of being in the way for a little bit, for like a turn or two. But I decide that that's fine. So Tracer turn 5 gets to play 2 amulets, which is pretty good because that means you get to do 2 things with those on his next turn. Trashes a copper, gains a silver, similar to what I did on turn 3. So here I take a coin and I take a silver. There's a couple options there. One is I can trash 2 cards, which is perfectly fine. But I think at this point, trashing copper's a thing I still want to do for sure, but it becomes less impactful when you have more Storytellers, because Storytellers are going to cycle through your deck pretty fast. Because Storyteller just like draws a lot of cards, right? And so I go ahead and opt for gaining a silver, which the Storyteller likes, and gaining another Storyteller. So, but again, trash 2 cards there was also probably fine. So here I have a amulet coming in. Now, Storyteller can only play up to 3 treasures, and so I trash a copper here because I don't really care about the copper, and the Storyteller can still play silver, copper, copper, so it still plays for its maximum draw. So that's what I opt for. Here, note that I draw the Storeroom. It's not really what I wanted to find there. I like to find my other Storyteller. I like to find my amulet. Again, the Storeroom doesn't do all that much for me, but I do get to cycle 3 cards at least. So I can discard 3 coppers here. I get to draw the rest of my deck. I get to discard the Storyteller because I can't play the Storyteller meaningfully, so I just discard it for a coin. And now I'm stuck with amulet, silver, copper. I do want to play this amulet because, amulets are good to have. And I believe what I do is I opt to just toil and trash this copper right here. There are some thoughts of just like gaining a silver and buying like a Faithful Hound or something, but I think just, trash copper is pretty reasonable. Oh, no, hold on. I just gained a silver? Never mind. I did gain a silver. Which is also fine. Like, again, Storytellers like silver. If it wasn't for Storyteller, I would never gain a silver there, but Storyteller is kind of unique in that regard. Here, I think I misplayed this turn, because I meant... Yeah, I misplayed this turn, because I meant to draw exactly to the end of my deck. I left 1 card there for no good reason. I should have drawn it to exactly to the end, but it's fine. So we haven't talked about the Border Village yet, and that was my first Border Village. Border Village is, well, I had 6 coins there, right? So my options are gold, which I'll probably talk about gold. No, gold's not a very good card. It is a payload card. New players tend to really like golds, but it's generally just not very good. It's not that it's bad. Like, the effect +3 coins from a treasure is actually pretty good. It's just that it's very expensive, and gold competes with literally everything else in this kingdom except for province, right? So when I buy a gold, I could instead buy anything else. And compared to the rest of this board, the gold just doesn't do nearly as much. It produces more coin. Like, nothing else produces 3 coins. Idol produces 2, Tormentor is 2, Vault or Storm could produce more, right? But when your deck already has a lot of coppers and treasures, like, Vault doesn't actually produce coins. because you don't have any, things to discard to produce coins to it. So gold would produce more money, but the thing is, it's a payload card, and I still don't have control of my deck. Also, it's not my favorite payload card here. My favorite payload card here is Idol. Because Idol, the boons are okay, but mostly I want to get curses. Cursing is really good. And because I hit 6, I might as well take a free Border Village, right? That's one of the nice things about Border Village is you get to just have it for free if you want a 5 cost anyway. So I want a 5 cost anyway. If Border Village wasn't here, I would still take a 5 cost. I would not take a gold. But because Border Village exists, I take a free Border Village, basically. There's not too much to do with villages here, because again, I'll have some in the storeroom. I have a storeroom. I might have like a Tormentor later or something, but the Border Village isn't that good. It's not that necessary because my Storyteller is already non-terminal. But if it's free, might as well take it, right? So yeah, and Tracer's doing roughly the same thing I'm doing. He's just slightly further behind due to the fact that my draws were better than his draws. Alright, so here I take a trash, I believe. Take a coin, yeah. There is one other interaction that's kind of interesting with Amulet Storyteller, which is Amulet produces a coin at the start of your turn. So you can kind of just use Amulet to draw an extra card, because if you play Amulet for +1 coin, and then play a Storyteller, it turns that coin into an extra card. So really, Amulet, the +1 coin from Amulet at the start of the turn often just functions like +1 card, which is often a pretty good effect. But I think my deck is already reliably drawing enough that I don't need to worry about an extra card of draw, right? Alright, and I do find the other Storyteller, which is pretty lucky there. If I had missed the Storyteller, my turn's a little bit more sad. And all I'm going to do here is play 3 coins to draw to the very end of my deck. So it's very helpful to manage shuffles. Like I could draw 1 card here, I could draw 2 cards here, but there's no other draw cards in there, right? And so for my turn to be as good as possible, usually I need to draw my draw cards in my opening 5 cards, right? Like if I don't find a Storyteller, well, I don't really have much of a turn, right? The turn just kind of stops. I don't get to draw more cards. So I want to really find a Storyteller. And because none of these 3 cards are Storyteller, well, then if I want to maximize my chances of drawing a Storyteller in my opening shuffle, what I want to do is draw all of these cards. And that way, right, I'll have a completely fresh, clean shuffle, and I'll maximize my chances of drawing Storyteller for next turn, which is, a thing that I really, really, really want to do. So I'm going to play those 2 to draw exactly that. I could play the Amulet. I could gain a silver, I could trash here, but looking at the fact that I have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 coins in hand, I don't want to trash because, well, again, silver is okay in this deck, but also I can just gain a Border Village here. And trashing would mean I don't get a Border Village. Trashing there was also probably reasonable. And so the question is now, do I want another Storyteller or do I want an Idol? Well, given that I already just drew my deck, I probably don't need to add more draw to my deck, and so I'm okay adding a little bit more payload. Because again, control first, payload second. I have control, I'm drawing my deck. That's good. This turn's a little bit scary because I don't have a Storyteller in it. Like I said, I want to find Storyteller. But it's not that bad if I'd missed Storyteller because I have both Idols and I have the other Amulet, so that's just kind of like the most my turns generally do anyway. But I also get a bit lucky and do draw the Storyteller off of this Border Village, and I find it there. Alright, I get to play a bunch of cards there. I can play all these treasures and draw as much as possible. Now, note that I'm overdrawing my deck. I have more draw cards. Like, I can draw more cards than are actually in my deck, right? If I played Storyteller here and I played all these silver, I would draw all the cards in my deck and more. So once you're at the stage of drawing all of your cards and more, you can start making use of that overdraw to do some things with. So in this case, I'm playing the storeroom first. And the reason I'm playing storeroom first is that, like I said last turn, I want to find a Storyteller every single turn. It's really important that I find Storyteller so I can have a full turn. So what I'd like to do is seed my turn, right? I would like to set this up so a Storyteller ends up on top of my deck. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to discard the Storyteller and 2 more cards, and that's going to draw me 3 cards, right? Storeroom discards 3 cards, draws 3 cards. So what's going to happen is I discard 3 cards and I draw 3 cards. I draw these 2 cards on top of my deck first, and then I draw 1 more card. And if that card is not Storyteller, that means I'm guaranteed to start my next turn with the Storyteller, because it's going to be one of the other cards I did not draw. So this is a thing that you should be thinking about quite a bit when you have a deck that has good control like this deck right here. You should be thinking about setting up your next turn, because like I said, a turn without Storyteller is much, much worse than a turn with Storyteller to start. So I'm going to at least attempt to. It's not a guarantee, because I could just draw the Storyteller, and then if I do that, then, well, I can't, then I don't have the ability to top deck the Storyteller again. But I'm at least give it a try, right? Like, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, but I'm going to try. So I go ahead, I discard Storyteller, I think copper, silver, I draw, and, I find the Storyteller. It's not my favorite thing to happen there, because I wanted to keep the Storyteller on top, but, it's fine. I can just play the Storyteller and just draw my deck anyway, right? And so it's fine. I hit 12 and 2 money, 12 money and 2 buys, so I add another Storyteller and another idol. So again, I'm just increasing my payload as much as possible. Now, fortunately, I do find Border Village Storm right here, so even if I don't find a Storyteller, I can play the Border Village Storm to discard everything and hopefully still draw a Storyteller. And Tracer's doing like pretty much the same build as I am, because it seems like the thing that makes the most sense here. But again, due to my shuffles just being better than Tracer's, I'm just ahead in that regard. And trying to remember what happens next. I believe I do find a Storyteller off this Border Village though, just because my draws this game are very, very lucky. Here. Oops. No, sorry, no I don't. Never mind. I thought I did. Where are we? Okay, there we go. So, yeah, I'm going to take a coin. I don't find it. I play the Storm to discard as much as possible. I go ahead and I just discard the Amulet because I plan on drawing it again. And by discarding, I get an extra card of draw off my Storyteller. So, that's fine. Drawing. Because I had to play my Storm early in the shuffle, I don't have the ability to try to top deck my Storyteller, right? So that's not an option I have for this particular turn. It only works with if I draw the Storm later in the shuffle. So here I can trash. I can also just try to draw a bit. I can also gain a silver and then play Storyteller to draw that silver. I believe this is the turn where I do something silly, if I remember correctly. I just made a brain thing happen, which was that one there. Yeah, I didn't, because I have 1, 2, 3 cards to draw, so I wasn't supposed to play both idols. I was supposed to only play the first idol, and then I would have drawn exactly 3 cards. Instead, I played the second idol before I drew, which means I drew 3 cards, and then the extra 3 coins just disappears, right? Like, Storyteller doesn't, like, save those 3 coins for you, it just disappears. So, I hit 12 and 3 buys here. I could have had 15 and 3 buys. And 15 and 3 buys would have been a lot better, because I could have taken 3 5-cost cards, instead of only 2 5-cost cards. But, it was just me being a doof for a second, so that does happen. Once in a while, it does happen to me. So I take one more idol, I take a Hound, because I have enough Border Village at this point, plus the Storm, that the Hound has some value to it. And I take another idol, which gives me 4 idols, and another Storyteller, which gives me more draw. The 4 idols means I can curse twice per turn, and this is pretty helpful because Amulet can trash twice, but it only trashes at the start of your turn on the duration part, and so unless you happen to draw one of the curses, it doesn't really trash at the start of your turn very well. Later in the game. Early in the game, you're always trashing estates and coppers, and it's fine. Later in the game, it's hard to trash. So, given that, it's actually hard to trash 2 curses per turn. You can trash 1 curse per turn pretty easily, but you can't really trash 2 curses per turn very, very easily. So that's why I think the 4th idol there was pretty valuable, with the ability to trash a little bit faster. And so like I'm just ahead on all the metrics, right? I have extra Border Village, or 2 maybe. I have 2 extra idols, I have 2 extra storytellers, right? So at this point, Tracer has to be thinking, okay, I'm really far behind. How do I stop? Like, how can I possibly win this game? And this is a thing you do when you're behind, is you think about what has to happen for me to win this game. And it's usually one of two things, or it has to be one of two things. Either your opponent makes a big mistake, or there's a big shift in the luck, right? So if you happen to get very lucky, or your opponent happens to get very unlucky, sometimes you can turn a losing position into a winning position. And then sometimes your opponent just makes a big misplay. At this level, I'm usually not expecting my opponent to make a misplay. I'm usually expecting my opponent to play, not flawlessly, but at least, well. And if they do play poorly and they make a mistake, I'm okay with that. I'm just going to pause here because this decision is important, but I'm still wrapping up this thought. So a lot of times you have to play risky if you're behind. You have to go for a high roll, consider what it would take. So in this case, I don't think Tormentor is like a super great card. And I guess we can take a look at the hexes right now. I don't think Tormentor is a super great card, but there are a couple nasty hexes. So in this game, Delusion's a little bit mean because it means you can't buy action cards. It's not that bad though, because you can still buy provinces, you can still buy idols. But a lot of times Delusion can hurt. It means I can't buy more storytellers, I can't buy a storeroom, I can't buy a border village, right? Envious can hurt a little bit. I do have a lot of silvers, so Envious has some merit, right? Getting copper on top of my deck it hurts a little bit. Misery scores 2 points, right? A good Locust could hurt a bit, like if you hit one of my storytellers or one of my idols, or even my storeroom, that could hurt pretty bad. Poverty hurts a little bit. It's not the biggest thing here, but it hurts a little bit. Plague is okay here, but again with amulets, it's less exciting because you can just trash that curse right away. War could also hit the storeroom. There's a couple hexes that can hurt pretty bad, but there's a lot of hexes that don't do anything really. Like Fear probably doesn't do that much. Famine doesn't do very much. Bad Omens doesn't do that much. On this particular board. Sometimes they do more, but on this particular board they don't do that much. And so probably on average, Tormentor, the hex doesn't do that much. But if you get lucky and you get one of the really good hexes, then maybe that's a way to get back into the game. And so I think that's probably what Tracer is thinking, is I need to get lucky. I'm gonna swing for a good hex. And if I get it, maybe I can do something. And if I don't, well, I was probably losing anyway, right? So that's one of the things to keep in mind on if you feel like really far ahead or really far behind, right? Playing risky when you're behind, taking chances, hoping your opponent has a bad turn, things like this are very often what you have to do when you're playing from behind. So back to the game. This turn here, note that I've drawn most of my deck, and again, now at this point, most of my turns feel pretty much the same. There's not like a whole lot going on. I'm just doing the same thing over and over again. But at this point, I'm going to, again, try to top deck a Storyteller, because I don't need the Storyteller to draw my deck at this point. So if I discard 3 cards, because note there are 2 cards on top of my shuffle here, if I discard 3 cards, I will draw 3 cards. I will draw these particular 2 cards, and then 1 more card. So, given this hand here, I can actually guarantee that I have a Storyteller on top of my deck. If I discard Storyteller, Storyteller, Faithful Hound, then I will draw those 2 cards and only 1 card, only one of which can be Storyteller, which means I'll draw one of these Storytellers, but not the other Storyteller. Faithful Hound has the interaction where if you discard it, you can set it aside, and you get it next turn. And so that will never be on top of my deck. I'm just going to set that aside. So this guarantees that I top deck a Storyteller. And so when you have the opportunity to do things like this, you should always do things like this. Now, if I didn't do this, there's a chance that there's a good chance I still draw Storyteller. There's a good chance I still have a full turn, but why take the risk, right? Why not just top deck a Storyteller? Because the thing that loses me this game right now is if I have a really bad turn. If I just have like a full dud turn, I can't do anything, that's going to help, or that's going to weaken my position considerably. So as long as I'm making sure I have a good turn every turn, I'm maximizing my chances of having a good turn, I'm going to be in pretty good shape. And so I'm going to discard Storyteller, 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 Hound. I think I'm just doing some quick math there. And I'm here. So now I have this particular hand. I can discard the Storyteller for a coin. That last card there is Storyteller, and then my Amulet can trash this curse, and it's a pretty happy turn. I have 15 and 2 buys, and now the question is, do we keep building, or do we green, right? So greening is the term we use for when we start buying victory points, right? Called greening because the victory points are, well, green, right? So I opt for splitting the difference here. I take 1 green card, and I continue to build. I take a border village, and do I take a Storyteller or a Tormentor here? I forget. I think they're both reasonable. So I would like to be in the position to take... I have 1+ buy, so the most points I can score in a turn is taking 2 provinces. So I'd like to be in a position where I can buy 2 provinces, right? Which would mean I probably need a little more economy. So something like a Tormentor could be fine because it produces some economy for me. But also, I might be thinking I'm in a position where I'm really far ahead, and I just don't want to dud, right? I just don't want to dud. As long as I don't dud, I'm going to win this game, right? As long as something doesn't happen that's really unlucky, I'm going to win this game. And so taking a Storyteller in that sense might make more sense. I could also take gold at this point, but I think gold is just worse than Tormentor. The action is not a problem because I have a lot of border villages. It does produce 1 less coin, but the hex is probably more relevant than a coin. And so I'm pretty sure I take the Tormentor here, right? I do. And one of the things to note is, because I know I have a Storyteller for sure on top of my deck, I know I'm less likely to dud, and so taking a Tormentor there is a little more reasonable. If I didn't have a Storyteller on top, I'm a little more likely to dud, and so maybe I do want the extra Storyteller. So Tracer is going to play his turn out. He's going to... get mostly a full turn, but Tracer is just so far behind on development due to mostly luck. And Poverty hits. Poverty's hurts a little bit. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it hurts a little bit. It does cost me like a little bit of draw. So on a board like this, Storyteller turns draw into or economy into draw. So if you lose draw, what you're really losing is economy. So by discarding 2 cards there, I basically lose 2 coins. But my turn should still be fine because I have a Storyteller to start with here, and that's usually enough to kick off on this sort of board, is having a Storyteller to start. And at this point, the game sort of just plays itself out. I'm kind of going to go a little faster to the end of the game here, just because at this point I've said almost all the things I need to say about the state of this game. I guess one decision right here, real quick, is I could play the Hound first, or I can play the Storyteller first. Playing the Hound first could find me an extra treasure, so the Storyteller draws more cards, but it means I can't discard the Hound to my storeroom later on in the turn. But I think my draw is good enough where I just opt to play the Storyteller first. And then I'm just going to skip forward a little bit here, because I don't think it's... Yeah, I hit a province there. I don't hit double province, because I think losing a couple of cards there hurt. So I only get the single province there. Probably due to the Poverty attack. Tracer has a turn. I have a turn here. So, yeah, I'm drawing. One... Sorry, just because I did something really stupid, I need to at least mention it. So I'm looking at this turn right here, and I'm thinking, oh, I can just win. Because I can hand out this second curse with an idol, and then I have enough money to buy 2 border villages. The first one can gain a Storyteller, and the second one can gain whatever. And that's 3 piles, right? Curses, border villages, Storyteller. And so I'm pretty sure, like, I'm just going to win this turn. So I don't play the turn out like I normally would, because I'm just going to buy the piles and win, right? And that would have been fine, but I forgot, I completely forgot one of the hexes, and as we were talking about before, let's just bring up this little guy. One of the hexes is called Delusion. Delusion, where are you? There you are. Gives you this deluded state, which means you can't buy actions this turn. And hey, guess what's an action? Border village. So what happens is I just play as if I was going to buy 2 border villages, and I can't buy border villages, so I don't set up my turn properly. Now, I didn't actually initially discard my cards because I was just thinking, okay, I don't need to discard. I'm just going to buy the 2 border villages. It's fine. Where are we? Somewhere in here. But then I realized I'm diluted, so I do ask for the undo from Tracer, who was kind enough to grant it. I decided not to play like the rest of my turn out. I just go ahead and just discard the extra treasures or the extra cards in my hand. That's all I did with the undo was discard the extra things in my hand and buy 2 provinces instead. In reality, I should have been like setting up my turn. I didn't actually play the Tormentor because I thought the game was over. I didn't set up my turn. I didn't like try to top deck a Storyteller because I thought the game was over. So I could have undone more and tried to like actually play the full turn out, but I was already kind of embarrassed for just like doing that, and so I decided to just stop my turn there, just discard, take the 2 provinces. It's fine. And then Tracer takes 1 more province, and then I have a good enough turn here to just take 2 more provinces. So this turn I could also do the double border village turn this turn and also win, but I have 2 provinces in my hand, so I might as well just do that and take the game. So I'm just doing some quick math, seeing if I have enough money in my hand for all of this, and I do. So yep, that's that. Just take some provinces. I buy a toil to end the game just for funsies, and that is it. So that was how this game went. I did win in the end, I think largely just due to having significantly better draws. I think we both played it more or less the way any high-level player would play that game. But yeah, I chose this game because it has a lot of the different elements that I wanted to showcase without being too complicated. Sometimes Dominion gets very complicated, and you have to think like a lot more, but this is a pretty standard kind of game, right? There's a game you can get control, you can get really good control, you can trash pretty well, you can draw pretty well. There's good enough payload, and you're building to like not like a big mega turn where you buy all the provinces in one turn, but you're building to like a province or 2 every turn. And so it's a pretty standard kind of way that this game plays out. Note it took 15 turns here for me to win, which is like a pretty moderate pace. So that's going to be it for this episode of Dominion Overexplained. I might do more, I might not. Stay tuned. If I do more, I probably pick like more complicated engines to explore and to discuss. But for this first one here, I at least want to just pick something pretty straightforward. So anyway, if you enjoyed this, leave a like or a comment. I don't know, is that what people say? Anyway, if people enjoyed this, I'll probably make some more. If not, I might make some more anyway because I don't care. Okay, anyway, that's going to be it. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time.